Welcome to the Page Turners podcast, where book lovers unite to celebrate the enchanting world of fiction. With your host, Paul A. Brooks. In each episode, we'll dive into the captivating realms of storytelling, exploring the pages that transport us to magical places and introduce us to unforgettable characters. In each episode, we'll embark on a creative expedition through the minds of seasoned and emerging writers to unravel the mysteries and unveil the passion that fuels their stories. Join us on this odyssey through the pages and pixels of imagination, where words become worlds and stories illuminate our lives. So, pour yourself a coffee and immerse yourself in discussions about writing, gripping plots, heroes and villains, and the sheer joy of escaping into a well-crafted story.
On today's podcast, I'm with Martin Lejeune, half of the Bradley Lejeune writing duo of the McMurdo Rift Series. Now, the books are beautifully written and they've got rave reviews. And if you like your sci-fi packed with mystery and action, then the McMurdo series is for you. Hi, Martin. Thanks very much for joining me today on today's podcast. It's great to meet you. I know we've sort of messaged backwards and forwards, and you're in our Facebook group as well. But, you know, we were saying earlier on, it is so nice to put a face to a name. Is it snowing and icy where you are?
Not where I am, but my wife's just come home from work, and it was when she left.
Well, yeah, I think it's going to do that here a little bit later on. We've avoided the floods, thank goodness. But yeah, I don't think we're going to get away with the snow and all of that sort of stuff. That's going to hit us. It is really cold outside at the moment. So yeah, it would be nice to be up in the warmth of space.
It depends. Like if you're in direct sunlight, it gets very hot, and as soon as you're out of it, it drops away. But then the stuff you're used to being hot is the air, and they don't have that, so it's a bit complicated.
Yeah, well, that's really so. Have you done much research then? Obviously, you've done a bit into the sort of science behind your sci-fi series, which we're going to talk about the McMurdo series shortly. Have you? So yeah, we can start with that then. So how do you do your research for the ships and the planets and the technology that you use?
I actually got an email recently from a guy in Switzerland who deals with disposing of like nuclear material, and he'd read my reader magnet and was just like, it was about 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning. He decided the best use of his time was to write to me and be like, look, you've made all the same mistakes that all the other science fiction writers make, where you've got spaceships shooting lasers at each other as if that would do any damage. And I said, thank you for taking the time to write to me and for taking the time to read my writing.
Yeah.
What I wanted to say was none of that was a mistake. It was all perfectly intentional. You look at The Expanse, which is has a lot of physics in what's going on and tries to be as realistic as possible.
The TV series.
Yeah, and the novels.
Okay, yeah.
And it gets criticism that something that doesn't even bother, like Stargate Atlantis, just doesn't get because it tries.
Yeah.
So we knew we wanted to write in a way that was the sort of thing that would be on BBC Two at 6 o'clock 30 years ago.
Yeah.
You
we've got to have some artistic license as well. I mean, our imaginations tend to wander off in all sorts of different directions as well. We've got to bring those in without bringing it all the way down to reality. There has to be some imagination that goes into it. There's plenty of research that goes into whatever you're doing anyway. But
a lot of what I do research is the second book, The McMurdo Triangle, was very much inspired by the Lusitania disaster.
Okay,
which was a liner across the Atlantic in the early years of the 20th century. And it was sunk by a German U-boat, which eventually brought the Americans into the First World War. And there's a brilliant book on this called Dead Wake, which I really enjoyed. And as I'm reading it, they're talking about First World War U-boats and how, like, the Lusitania was sunk in 20 minutes. Wow. For context, the Titanic took 2 hours.
Yeah.
A U-boat could just hit a vessel with a torpedo and it was gone. but until after the Second World War, submarines could only submerge for minutes, not hours. And they would submerge to attack. And the only way they would know it was safe to surface is if they surfaced and were still in one piece. And you've got a very powerful weapon for your antagonist with a vulnerability, which is how, you know, things need to be in fiction. And I just thought, oh, and I think this a lot. Put that in space, that'll be a good story.
It works, though.
But I've read the book, so I've done the research, so I don't have to worry about it. I can just crack on.
Absolutely, that's quite right. But again, you know, we can pull all sorts of different ideas from different genres as well and pull them in. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that. So yeah, that's something, you know, a lot of people start really worrying about is, you know, how realistic has it got to be, you know? But I'm thinking, no, just add in your own really, your own imagination, let that in. Now, a few minutes ago, when we were talking, you mentioned we write. So you're one half of the two of you. So do you want to talk a little bit about Malcolm? Because you're a visual effects and filmmaker guy, aren't you? And he's a ghostwriter, is that right?
Yeah, that's how it all started. The pen name is Bradley Lejeune. I'm Martin Lejeune. He's Malcolm Bradley. It's like a law firm, but with books.
Yeah.
And I've known Malcolm for about 20 years. We were ice cream men together.
Wow.
And I was making short films and I hit a brick wall and was like, I don't know what my next film should be. And he was like, I've got a few ideas. Give me like what you can get, like what locations you can get, what actors you can get, and I'll come up with some ideas. So I say there's this place that's by the river, looks quite cinematic. I can get, you know, a man and a woman, 2 roles. And he goes off and he comes back with his script and he goes, you're not going to like it. And it was basically a 2-minute zombie apocalypse.
Right.
With clowns.
Oh, well, okay. This sounds like classic Stephen King pulling 2 weird things together and making a story out of it. Fantastic.
So yeah, we did that. And then we sort of fell out of touch for a while. And then about 5 years ago, I started freelancing and he was freelancing as a writer. So we just started checking in with each other to keep each other sane. And we'd been looking into what was happening with indie publishing and Kindle and all that. And, you know, we'd both sort of half started projects and not got anywhere. And like the writers of The Expanse are also partnership. So describe one as coming up with the ideas and the other one as knowing how to put a book together. Whereas I'd sort of describe us as I'm good at the big picture ideas and he knows how to spell the words.
Which is always a help. So how do you work together then? I mean, do you write something and send it to him as an email or on Skype, or do you collaborate together, I suppose, a bit as we are now on camera, and share and swap ideas and then leave you each other alone for a day or two and then come back together? How do you put it all together?
A bit of everything, really. We have a weekly sort of sit down where we call each other up and sort of sometimes we'll just be like, oh, did you see the new Star Trek?
Right.
You know, and other times we'll really get into the weeds on, you know, some plot elements, and other times it will be like, oh, I think we should spend all our money on marketing. But I'll generally do the outlining and then run that by him. And with the first 3, I actually sat down and did a first draft on all of them really quickly.
Yeah.
I think I started the first one in about April 21.
Yeah.
And then I finished the third in September or October.
Right. Wow. Okay. Yeah, pretty quick. So would you say then, I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit with your writing style. Would you say you're more of a plotter than a pantser? So
Uh, oh, absolutely. I have very complicated spreadsheets with all my outlines in.
see that amazing. That just blows my mind. I mean, as you can probably see, I've got a whiteboard behind me here, and I just scribble ideas on it as with all the other notepads and that I've got here as well. But I don't. I find it really hard to sit and structure a story with dates and times and seasons and characters and all that stuff, and knowing exactly where everything is. My mind doesn't work like that, and I admire you for being able to do it, because there are times when I'm sitting there thinking, "Oh, if only I'd have done that, I could see how that would fit into that story. It would perhaps stop me from having to go back again a few times." But wow, yeah, if you, yeah,
I read a few books on how TV series get written, and there was a really good one by Pamela Douglas called "Writing the TV Drama,"
okay,
and it had a brief interview with Ron Moore when he was doing Battlestar Galactica,
hmm
which helped sell me on it. And they actually published the way that a writer's room would break down a show into acts for the advert breaks. And
okay,
sort of like in the 90s, you sort of had four equal acts with about 7 scenes each. And then by the mid 2000s, you'd have like 6 acts where the first few would have longer scenes, and then the later ones would be much shorter with more ad breaks.
right,
But that kind of 4-act structure always stuck out to me, and the way it was broken down, I was just like, well, if I put that in Excel rather than Word, I can just drag something if I want to move it, and that would be easier.
wow,
Um,
okay.
and it all just sort of started from there.
Well, I'm jealous. It's way too organized for me. I just can't. Just wow, that just blows my mind. Thinking about with screenwriting and sort of TV series and breaking them down into the acts and things like that. Have you got plans then, thinking about your background, to produce the McMurdo series in another format, in a different medium, say, for example, a TV series?
Not at this time. I know some people who are doing sci-fi on low budget and doing amazing work,
Mm.
but I'm holding out for someone to come along with a pile of money and be like, "Yes, we would like to option this, please."
We'll do that. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's good. Okay, so what inspires you then to, or inspired you to write the McMurdo series, to start it off with Rift? What was the impetus for that? Was it things like Battlestar Galactica and things like that that pushed you forwards?
Casablanca.
Casablanca. Well, okay, you've got to explain that one. Go on.
Um, well, it was really unique because we knew we wanted to do something that we didn't necessarily know, but we wanted it to be interlinked books like Game of Thrones or Harry Potter, where it's one after the other. It could have been more episodic, but we knew we wanted something that had the potential to run and run.
Mhm.
So it was very difficult, very different from how you'd usually just come up with a story which would have an ending in mind.
Yeah, yeah,
And so I started just brainstorming things and like, how do we come up with a setting and somewhere that we can keep coming back to? And you get this idea in TV of what's the story engine?
yeah,
Like the Enterprise goes to a new planet every episode. Buffy's on the Hellmouth, so there's a reason
yeah,
something's happening.
yeah,
And what I really didn't want to do is, you've probably had this as well, a decade or so of Facebook ads of going, oh, I bet you miss Firefly. Oh, read my book. It's exactly the same.
yeah, constantly. Yeah,
And I didn't want to have like a small crew on a freighter, like Firefly. So I was like, what can we do? And one thing I'd never really seen was like a space opera. It was just based on a planet, and they'd go off for adventures, but that's where they'd come back to.
well,
And
interrupt you. There's Babylon 5.
yeah, which is on that shelf there.
Yeah. that was one of my favorite TV programs back in the day. Yeah, I think it's available on Amazon Prime. You can still get
Yeah,
it. So yeah, sort of space operas. Sorry, carry on.
and we'll circle back to that. But what I wanted was somewhere that was a unique setting, and we were kicking around this idea of this mining outpost, and then we settled on the idea of basically the equivalent of a liner that you'd get in like the 1930s that would go
Yeah,
back and forth.
yeah,
And one of our watchwords was very much faded seaside glamour.
right. Do you know
Um,
what that really comes across when you're talking about the SS Olympic,
oh
presumably?
yeah,
We'll talk about that in a moment. But that's it's really strange because when you said that, that immediate picture flashed up in my mind of the big ocean going liner, that kind of idea. Yeah, perfect. Sorry, carry on.
and like with any of those kind of civilian craft, I will look through the White Star and the Cunard line for names.
Right.
And then a lot of the military ships, I'll just look through the Royal Navy or the US Navy and try and keep those kind of names so it feels like you just get a bit of world building without putting the effort in.
And it's familiarity as well, isn't it? You know,
Exactly.
people know, can relate to it. Absolutely. So in that case, then we need to talk a little bit about your series, the McMurdo series. So you've got the
Yeah.
3 books out there, Rift,
Mhm.
Triangle, and the new one that's just come out now, the McMurdo War. Yeah, there it is. Do you see? Yeah, good plug. You can put it down now. um, let's talk about, or I'll get you to talk about the McMurdo Rift because I mean I have to say, I mean I've read the Rift and Triangle, and I'm not just saying this, but I thoroughly enjoyed them. The reviews have been really good, but I really like the writing. I know that sounds odd as a writer. You're a writer as well, but I really enjoyed it. It's witty. And there's a real good smattering of British sarcasm in there as well, particularly in the dialogue between some of the characters in there. And I really enjoyed it. So I highly recommend them immediately. Go and buy them now so that you can get into the series as well. But Martin, talk a little bit about McMurdo Rift, first of all, the first one in the series. Give us a little bit of an overview of that. And then, yeah, I might ask you some questions about it in a moment.
It's about a guy called Mark Franklin. He was a fighter pilot during the war, a good
Yeah.
one too, and he saves the world at a terrible price. And it's he has to do some quite bad things and that haunt him. It ends up costing him his marriage, and he runs away. And that's the prologue. And we pick up with him 10 years later, and he's become a barman on the SS Olympic,
Yeah.
which is this aging liner doing the old run through the McMurdo Rift, a backwater that used to be quite significant and no longer is. And his ex-wife walks into the bar and says that she needs his help finding her missing husband.
Yeah.
And he has to make a choice on whether he's ready to come back into the world again and readdress those issues.
He comes across as very much a sort of a reluctant hero. You can hear it, and
He's a total wet blanket.
well, yeah, I suppose. I was being polite, but yeah, yeah, absolutely. And his ex-wife Sarah, wow, what a piece
And
of
she
work.
isn't.
Yeah, no, exactly. So there's an in and out, on and off all the time. And again, I don't want to give too much of it away, but she's got a really good story as well. When it moves on, so it moves on from Rift into McMurdo Triangle, and starts with the prologue of the ship that goes missing. So that's the Carol Deering, isn't it? That's just Carol Deering that goes missing. So
which
and then,
is named for a ship that went missing in the Bermuda Triangle.
Bermuda Triangle, yeah, absolutely. And that's what I really like about it. And actually, I've tried to do that in Altered Evolution as well, is to bring things in that have actually happened that people can research and go, oh well, okay, and then it's sort of, again, it's much more relatable and draws people into the narrative, into the story. So absolutely, that's really good. So talk to us a little bit more about the McMurdo Triangle, and this is where I was talking earlier on about the witty banter between Gus and Mark Franklin on the ship
Mhm.
as well. There's some really good dialogue in the book in Triangle for that. But you talk to us about it.
One of the ideas, like looking at Babylon 5 and
Mm.
Deep Space Nine, they both did a really clever thing, which was they established their little corner of the galaxy and they built out from it.
Yeah, yeah,
And it wasn't until several seasons into Babylon 5 that you start to see Earth, that you start to see the different planets of the other ambassadors.
mm.
And like the story expands out to them. And we wanted to do a similar thing of really create our little pocket of the universe that the reader could get to know. And like I feel with hindsight, I did some really unnecessarily complicated things with the world building, because if you set a story in Skegness, everyone knows what a Skegness is.
Yeah.
Um,
As long as you're British.
yeah, or if you set it in New Jersey, everyone knows what a New Jersey is.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you set it in a new sci-fi universe with a government that's just been formed in the wake of a civil war, um, that's when things get complicated.
Yeah, sure.
Um, and we have a lot of push and pull between like the main human society is the United Terran Colonies, and there's some of the old guard that still see Earth as the capital.
Yeah.
Um, which is not an easy way to start a blurb if you're selling a book.
No, for sure, for sure. That conflict is quite hard hitting sometimes. There's a conversation in the bar between I can't remember the name of the character, but he's an old veteran, and he
Arnold Philby.
yes, he objects to Mark Franklin's conversation that he's having with a woman that's just come. I think the captain has just come into the bar.
Mm-hmm.
So that, yeah, very much so. And you can think sometimes, you think, oh, well, that was a little bit grating. But and I see what you're saying. But on the other hand, it's important to have that as well, because it gives, I think, a reader relief and an opportunity to start creating new pictures in their mind when they're reading.
The original idea with the character of Philby was that he was sort of going to be Captain Black, and he was
Right.
going to be the spy for the Koru.
Mhm.
And as we started, like we sort of had one idea for a 3-book series and another idea for a longer series.
Okay.
We realized if we did the longer series, then the Koru couldn't just be there twirling their moustaches and being evil. They needed to have reasons for what they were doing.
Yeah.
And so we sort of changed some things up. But I'm a big fan of placeholder names. Like,
Okay.
there's nothing worse than writing a scene and realizing there's a waiter and you have to name the waiter, and you're scrolling through names until you can find one that you're happy with,
Yeah.
until you can write a word.
Yeah.
So I came up with the most treacherous name I could think of, which was taking Kim Philby, the Cambridge spy who
Yeah.
defected to the Soviets,
Yeah.
and Benedict Arnold, who was in the American Revolutionary War, who defected to the British.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, his name is so on the nose, but I kind of like it. But as we changed it so that didn't happen, I realized I could keep it, and I was quite happy with that.
Yeah, absolutely. It fits perfectly. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
no, absolutely nothing wrong with it. Talking about placeholder names, I've fallen into that trap myself. In one of the short stories that I've written, it was I couldn't think of the name for an astronomer. So he was the astronomer, and I had to find it as I was going through once I'd found the name that I was going to use for it. And yeah, it's very frustrating when you kind of do things like that. But again, it's one of those things that you kind of have to work through, really, I suppose, when you're trying to finish a manuscript or at least a draft. So
Franklin was called Henry for the first draft.
right.
Space heroes aren't called Henry.
No, they're really not. No, they're really not. Sticking with Triangle for a minute, then, who gave Sarah's ship the name, the Mutts Nuts? I mean, that had me in bits.
That
I
was
was in
Muggins here.
stitches for that one. That's brilliant, really good.
Like we always have a bit of push and pull. We like, I know like the majority of our readers are in the US.
Hmm.
And we made a decision early on. We weren't going to write in American English. We weren't going to, do what Vancouver does when people shoot movies there and pass it off as San Francisco.
Right.
But we also didn't want to make a barrier for ourselves.
Mm.
And, I've got a friend who's an author who's ridiculously patriotic, frankly, and will never miss an opportunity to mention that there's a sofa or an articulated lorry when they get out of the lift.
Right.
And is gleeful whenever an American scratches their head and doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do that. And I think Malcolm's a bit quicker to have, the characters use Britishisms. And, there's been a couple of times where I've sort of been like, yeah, let's scale that back.
Yeah.
And then I just landed on, like, I was just chatting to an American friend and we were just throwing, phrases out. And I mentioned Mart's Nuts and I'm like, oh, that would be a good name
That's
for
the
the
name.
hero ship.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then I had to sort of go cap in hand and be like, so this is what the ship's called.
It's really good and it fits really well. And you're thinking about Sarah as well. She and Mark, you just call him Franklin. Now, it sounds odd, when she's talking about calling him Mark, and it sounds odd to her.
Yeah.
But Sarah and Franklin, they had this on-off relationship throughout. Did that happen organically, or was that written in? I know you said did you plot that in essentially?
Well, that was Casablanca.
Yeah. Okay.
That's Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman.
Yeah.
So we always knew that they'd have this history. And we had a lot of conversations of how is it going to end up. And, I've sort of got an idea of where that's heading now. But there's also what happens with her current husband and how that affects things. So we knew that they couldn't just get together.
Right.
Which would sort of put a stop to any of that. So we, it's just, if you're doing something that you're trying to get to go a long way, then you need to be able to keep the plate spinning.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about her. I don't want you to tell everybody what happened to Vic, but you're talking about Vic, her husband.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Oh, that's all right. Again, you just need to go and read it. I mean, because it's a really good story. Oh, so talk about the last one then, the one that's just come out now, McMurdo War. As and I've read the.
If anything, it's the halfway point.
Say again.
If anything, it's the halfway point.
I say, okay, so you've sort of snatched the next question up a bit. So expand on that a little bit then. Talk to us a little about McMurdo War. And because it starts way back hundreds of years ago with an expedition to the South Pole.
Yeah.
So do you want to kind of expand on that a little bit without giving too much away, if you can?
There's if you like movie commentaries,
yeah,
a really good one is Star Trek Generations with Ron Moore and Brannon Braga, the writers.
Okay.
And they talk about, they had a lot of limitations on what they could do in terms of using the original series cast and who they could get and how much screen time they could have and when that screen time could be. And they knew they were going to do an opening in the past and then cut to the Next Generation, which had just finished on TV.
Right.
And Jerry Taylor, one of the executive producers on the series, said that they should open the Next Generation segment with Captain Picard rolling an egg across the bar floor with his nose. Just in a way, because they'd opened it with just a outpost getting attacked and some random unknown Starfleet characters going, "Oh no, it's the Romulans shooting at us."
Yeah.
And I always like that idea of, and again, it goes back to the TV, your opening teaser
Mm.
And I like to open the books in a way that sets the reader a bit off balance.
Yeah.
And so the first one opens with a devastating attack on Earth. It's like the end of every alien invasion movie ever, except they're winning.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
second one, we meet these new characters in the Rift who are doing. They're um, like wannabe scientists doing experiments out the back of their trucks
Yeah.
and hoping nothing goes wrong, and it
Except
does.
it does. Yeah.
And I really like the idea of opening a space adventure in the past and just letting you figure out what's going on.
Hmm.
And then spent the next 2 years panicking that everyone would open it up and be like,
What is this?
what's this? No.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
like thematically, it touches on a lot of our ongoing themes of exploration,
Hmm.
of reaching beyond the known. But also, less metaphorically, there are direct connections to what happens in that book and why it happens and why things in the past happened.
Right. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to reading it. That one's I've got the first two are coming in paperback, so I've read them on Kindle. I've got them coming on paperback. They'll be on the shelf shortly, but I'll get the next one in a couple of weeks' time after I've gone through them. So I'm really looking forward to the story. Is there going to be more to it? Is it going to continue on?
Yes.
Excellent. That's good. That's all I needed to know.
Um,
Yeah,
it's got,
that's fantastic. When you're writing, thinking about your sort of writing process now, when you're thinking about what's happening next, and you've outlined it or you've plotted it out, what is your writing process? Do you have like a set route? I mean, I ask everybody pretty much who I talk to what their writing process is. Mine, for example, I'm an early riser, so I tend to edit what I've written the previous day first and then write the next bit. So I kind of rotate round and go through, because I like to have a nice clean first draft, or at least as clean as possible. What's your writing routine?
but yeah, I'm currently changing my process. I used to do all my writing in the evening after work. And then I did NaNoWriMo last year, and I started doing some morning sprints and found that much more doable than I'd assumed. And I was one to try and hit the biggest word count I would every day.
Right.
And now I'm sort of taking it a bit slower and cleaning it up as I go and seeing how that works.
Yeah.
I've just done a solo novel, which is like a military sci-fi, half military sci-fi, half space lady Indiana Jones.
Oh, right.
And now I've got that to all sit through and edit, and I don't like it, so I'd rather take a bit more time and have less editing to do in one big go.
Yeah, I'm the same. I don't like the editing process particularly, or necessarily the rewrite process. So I just find it constricting. So I try to do as clean a first draft as possible. It's not always possible. It's never perfect, but I find it better to do it that way, for me anyway, particularly.
Yeah.
So that's what you've got coming up then in the future. More stories for the McMurdo series, and you just said you've got a new series coming out, or a new project on the go.
Yeah, it's going to be a trilogy. The first one is drafted. The second one's outlined.
Right.
And I'm possibly looking at serialization for that.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's something that a lot of writers are looking at now, particularly. There are platforms out there. And I think, it's something that we on Page Turners are going to be looking to add as well. So people can then, if you've, like yourself, if you've got a story that you can serialize, it can go on there, which is great. Because I mean, a lot of people I speak to have a series on Wattpad or Royal Road or somewhere like that. And then of course there's Ream Stories. I think we touched on Ream Stories when we've been talking previous
Yeah.
to this. So there's lots of options in that respect, and I think serializing sci-fi works really well as long as I think you leave it on a decent cliffhanger. You know, that duff moment. Now, if you're British, you'll understand what that means. The end of the EastEnders thing. But yeah, 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 absolutely. But yeah, that sort of idea just to draw people in again. So yeah, serialization is a good thing, and I think it's probably got a really good future, and certainly for us as sci-fi writers. So yeah, that's something that I'd be looking at doing as well. So when we can talk about that sort of off camera a little bit later on.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that which will be really good. So as a writer, you're going to be a reader. I know I am. I read loads of stuff. Do you read sci-fi, or do you read a different genre?
I read a lot of sci-fi. I read a lot of like history, non-fic,
Right.
and I read a fair bit of espionage.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That kind of makes sense from what you said earlier on. Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. And so with that in mind, are you going to dip your toe into writing in different genres?
Possibly. I've probably got enough to see me through this year and into the next. Like I would love to write a spy thriller.
Right.
Sort of having looked into the numbers, they don't seem to do so well for indies. I've got an idea for a fantasy book, which there seems to be a lot of sci-fi writers jumping ship at the moment.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of I mean, not necessarily mine, but I think a lot of genres tend to creep into other genres as well. There seems to be that sort of cross-pollination, if you like, that seems to happen quite naturally. But yeah, you're right, they do.
I'm really bad for writing a book and then not editing it or doing anything with it. And I have written a like an urban fantasy, which I would like to do something with sometime, because it's a really fun idea. It's basically the 16-year-old chosen one who has to save the world. What happens when she hits 40 and has a dead-end job and no one believes her anymore?
Excellent. Yeah, that sounds good to me. Yeah, we'll have some of that. So, okay, so you're going to be hopefully dipping your toe into writing other things as well, which would be good. And particularly if you keep that same humor and wit going through that as well, it'll be a good read for sure.
Yeah, so, I find so much, like, especially on TV, and this just makes me sound old, it's just, it tends to be quite humorless, and the less humor there is, the more people seem to go, oh, yes, that's very worthy. And that doesn't, that just doesn't fly, for me at all, because life's fun.
Yeah.
Even if it's in its darkest moments, you can usually find something to laugh about. And if you don't have that in your writing, that's just not a true reflection of life.
No, that's true. That's true. It's almost as if, TV's for entertainment, isn't it? You don't want to be thinking too much. You want to be transported elsewhere. So yeah, I agree with you 100%. So that would be really good. So look, we've been talking for almost an hour. So let's leave it there for today. I would like to have you back on perhaps later on in the year when you've got some new stuff coming out. I know we're going to talk about doing stuff together later on. And then, yeah, we'll get you back on to talk about your new stuff. Would you be happy to do that?
Oh, absolutely.
Great stuff.
I love talking about myself. It's one of my favorite subjects.
Yeah. Let's stop talking about me. What do you think about me? Fantastic. Listen, Martin, thank you very much for coming on. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you today, and I'll get you back on and we'll do all this all over again.
Fantastic. Can't wait.
Thanks, Martin. Speak to you soon. Bye for now.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us on another captivating episode of the Page Turners podcast. We hope you enjoyed delving into the pages with us, discovering new stories, and revisiting beloved classics. If you're as passionate about books as we are, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and leave a review. Your feedback keeps us bringing you fascinating discussions, author interviews, and book recommendations. Remember, the adventure never ends when you have a book in hand. Until next time, keep turning those pages and let the magic of storytelling continue to inspire your imagination. Happy reading.